We're all taught that America was founded in 1776. It's in every textbook. But what if that's not the whole story? The 1619 Project from the New York Times asks us to think about a major reframing of American history, posing a really profound question. What if the country's true founding, the moment its DNA was really forged, happened more than 150 years earlier? To get to the heart of this huge historical argument, the project's creator, Nikole Hannah-Jones, starts somewhere really personal, not with a dry history lesson, but with a memory of her father, a flag, and a question that she just couldn't wrap her head around as a kid. And this is just so powerful, right? Because it immediately grounds this massive topic in a real human contradiction. Here's her father, a black veteran who lived through systemic racism, but he still proudly flew the American flag. And that central puzzle, how do you reconcile black patriotism with black suffering? That becomes the real emotional engine for this entire project. So, to even begin to find the answer to that question, we have to go back, way, way back. Not to Philadelphia in 1776, but to this place, this horizon. This is Point Comfort, Virginia. And the mood here is intentional. This isn't the triumphant story of the Mayflower we all know. This is the start of a very, very different American story. So, this is the pivotal moment, the date, August 1619. A ship shows up, and on board are the first enslaved Africans to be brought to the British colonies in North America. They'd been stolen from their homes in what is now Angola and were then sold to the colonists. This single event, as the project argues, is what planted the seeds of the nation we would eventually become. And that one event brings us right to the project's central thesis that 1619, not 1776, was the year that truly changed everything. And this slide just lays out the core argument so clearly. We're taught 1776 is our nation's birthday, all centered on the beautiful ideals in the Declaration of Independence. But the 1619 Project comes along and says, hold on, what if 1619 is the nation's true birth year? The moment that our defining contradictions, liberty and slavery, freedom and bondage, were born, right here together on the same soil. This timeline really puts it into stark perspective. Look at this. By the time Thomas Jefferson was writing All Men Are Created Equal in 1776, the institution of chattel slavery had already been grinding on in America for 157 years. A huge point the project makes is that if we just ignore this massive period of time, we're missing the very foundation the country was actually built on. Okay, so if 1619 is the real starting point, how exactly did slavery shape the nation's DNA? Well, the project argues it's deeply embedded in, well, everything: our economy, our politics, our culture. This is a really direct and challenging claim from the source material. It basically says that if you want to understand the ruthless efficiency of American capitalism, you can't start in the factories up north. You have to start on the southern slave labor camps. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating because it connects the past to today in a way you might not expect. These aren't just historical evils, they're recognizable business practices. Planters kept incredibly detailed books to track the daily cotton picked by each individual person. They created depreciation schedules for their human assets and even used them as collateral to get loans. The project argues that these were actually cutting edge management techniques that became foundational to modern American business. This quote from the British writer Samuel Johnson from a year before the Revolution, it just cuts right to the hypocrisy at the heart of the whole thing. He's asking, how can the people yelling the loudest about liberty be the very same people who own other human beings? How can they make a moral argument about being enslaved by the British crown? And that hypocrisy builds to what is probably one of the project's most provocative claims. It argues that by 1776, Britain was starting to have a real moral crisis over slavery, and there were growing calls to abolish it. For the American colonists, whose entire economy depended on slavery, this was a massive threat. So the project suggests that a major reason for declaring independence was actually to protect the institution of slavery. But this isn't all just ancient history. The entire argument of the project rests on what it calls an unbroken line, a direct connection from the past straight into our lives today. So, take a look at this, a picture of a traffic jam in Atlanta. You're probably thinking, what on earth could this have to do with slavery? Well, the project connects the dots. After the Civil War, you get segregation and redlining. Then, highways were deliberately built to isolate and sometimes even destroy Black communities. This forced people into sprawling suburbs, which created the exact gridlock that commuters are stuck in every single day. The past is literally paved into our present. This visual is designed to be jarring. On one side, you have enslaved people in a cotton field, their labor fueling an economy. On the other, incarcerated people in a modern prison yard. The project draws a direct line from the Black codes after the Civil War, laws that basically criminalized being Black, to today's system of mass incarceration. It argues that both systems have served to control Black bodies and extract labor. And then, of course, there's the economic legacy. This chart just lays bare the reality of the racial wealth gap. I mean, look at these numbers. The median wealth for a white family is around $171,000. For a Black family, it's just over $17,000. According to the project, this isn't some accident. It's the direct result of centuries of stolen labor, followed by decades of discriminatory policies that systematically blocked wealth from ever being built in Black communities. So, after tracing this long, unbroken line all the way from 1619 to today, the project leaves us with one final big question. What does this all mean for us right now? And ultimately, that's the challenge the 1619 project leaves us with. It's not just about learning a different date for the history books, it's about asking how this completely reframed history changes how we understand the country we live in today and our own part in it. It's a question that's really left for all of us to answer.